a few minutes here, and let me just get some chat going. All right. Make sure that takes about. There, people are starting to come in now, so we should see some. Everybody, just going to do a quick check. Everybody.
Who Andrew's been locking up everybody.
Yeah,
so the question
just
is,
so you know, we're
going
to get a little. Yeah, he's a little bit of robot man today.
Is it locking up again, guys?
Yeah, you're back. You're back now.
Okay.
Welcome
All right.
back,
Well, I'm going to apologize up front if I'm locking up. Gary and team will carry it from time to time. But Gary, first off, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I've been traveling the world for the last probably 6 weeks, but it's good to have. It was fun, but it's good to put my feet in one place.
Yeah, I want to start off before we get into the CyberCall today to talk about a few things. I was fortunate enough to go to welcome. Hey, Robbie, welcome everybody. I was fortunate enough to get to go to Kaseya Connect and see you on main stage with. Help me with the gentleman's name from Hot Ones.
Sean Evans.
That was so cool. And I feel like I live under a rock because I don't watch TV and things of that nature, Gare. But after watching it, looking in, I didn't realize he's interviewed like the who's
everyone. Yeah. He is huge. His YouTube show is massive. And I'll say this, of all the things I've done in my career, that's the one that has gotten the most feedback. And at least for a few weeks, my kids thought I was cool. That's over now. That's done.
But you got to give us like a little update. Like, give us a sense of wing number 1 to wing number 5 to 8, 9, 10. Like, what is it? And how intense does it get?
So the first 4 aren't that bad, although my head was starting to sweat and like they're tangy a little bit. You get up 5, 6, 7, you start feeling it. And to give you an idea, the first wing is like 1,400 Scoville, like on the heat scale. By the time you get to 8, you're at like 150,000. And for some reason, and then number 10 is 2.6 million. But when I got to number 8, it was so hot, Andrew, not just my tongue, but my whole mouth into my throat, like everything was burning. And I had this strategy of not drinking any water or milk until I could hold out as long. I held out all the way to number 8.
That's pretty good.
Sean won't drink unless you drink. So he's waiting for me because he mirrors the guests. And but afterwards, I went and saw with my wife and Jim Lippy. We went and saw Sammy Hagar play.
Oh, okay.
And that was at 8:05, and my lip was still numb.
How long did it take? Like till you finally were like back to normal.
When we went backstage, I had like 15 minutes to hang out with Sean, and we both sipped a little bit of milk. And it was controllable within 15, 20 minutes. Like it wipes away pretty quickly. And then there's like a tail on it that lingers a while.
That's just a weapon, Gary. That's like, it's you know what I mean? Like they started making all these peppers that are just, if you open the inside of them, it looks like an apple on the inside where all the hot stuff is. And they're for medical research, but man, that seems very, very, very unpleasant.
No one can convince me those last 3 wings that anyone is just eating them. Like,
right.
They're mixing them or using it in flavors. No one's going to sit and eat 6 of those wings. Like,
right.
It just
bear
would not
mace.
be enjoyable. And it's not that delicious when it's that hot.
Well, it can't taste like anything, right? It's got to taste like pain and fire.
Yeah. And I was making sure I was taking a big bite because I didn't want people saying that I was wimping out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. At 2.6 million, you're good.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
when my son,
I'll
say my son was in elementary school. He did a project about the, whatever that scale, what is it called? Schofield scale or whatever?
Scoville, yeah.
Scoville scale. And so then he was going to grow these peppers. So we ordered all these pepper seeds and whatever like the hottest pepper is, I forget, on Amazon. And then we're waiting for them to come. And then we get this letter that they were like held at the border because they didn't know what the heck they were.
That's great.
Wow.
I'm like, okay,
it was a fun experience, and he's great at interviewing. And I even though it was so hot, I enjoyed the whole experience.
It was a great interview. Really, really great. A lot of fun.
Good.
Thanks for sharing that, Gary. All right. Well, let me kind of just set the stage, and then we'll do another story, Gary, with Mike Chapin, our guest, and his company. But today, this is one that I'm actually, Gary, feel free to chime in here, right? Because VCISO, which is something that you've, spent of your MSP career involved in building some, I would argue is a hotly, somewhat we've heard VCIOs could be really have strong business acumen and really technical and really, on one end of the scale and true VCIO. And we've heard, naysayers be, oh, it's an account manager, it's a salesperson. Flipping.
Oh, we lost him again.
Got a vamp, Gary.
Yeah.
Am I back?
Yeah, we lost you again, Andrew. You're saying they fall onto a scale when you talk about VCIO.
Exactly.
Right.
And again, folks, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what is up with my internet, but bear with me. So now we have VCISO, Gary. I would argue a little bit different in the sense of, we are now,
Yeah. So what I'll fill in for Andrew. I'm going to say what I'm curious to get to, Stephen, as we'll let Andrew introduce you, is I see a lot of some different mistakes and some similar mistakes in people building out VCISO as VCIO. And I want to try to see if in our questions today we can get to that. But go ahead, Andrew. We got your back. Why don't you introduce Stephen?
I'll try again, but just real quick, what I think here, Gary, there's a lot of controversy, or will be a lot of controversy, right? In terms of this is.
Oh boy.
About.
Yeah.
You're back.
Am I frozen again?
Talk quickly when you can.
All right, real quick, and then I'll hand it to you guys to run.
Okay.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Steve Hicks. I am the security practice manager at Ensight. We're a managed service provider and a managed security service provider in California. We've got about 400 clients, managed between 10 and 15,000 endpoints, depending on labor loads, et cetera, et cetera. Just like I'm sure the rest of the MSPs on the call, our standard target market is in the 20 to roughly 200 range. We have multiple different verticals. We specialize heavily in legal and wine, but we have a general commercial. My entire goal at the organization is both our internal security at the organization, as well as leading the security practice, which frequently means I am a VCISO for some of our clients. Or I'm advising on our best security practices, doing webinars like this, trying to explain to people the value of security, especially when we all know security is at best when nothing happens, right? So there's a lot of value proving to be done. I think the reason we're here talking about this is how to define the difference between someone who just really likes security and effort being put into a VCISO and that path. So
yeah.
Hopefully that's good enough for Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, it's great if you guys can hear me. I don't know if you can.
We can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Gary, I'd like you to kick it off with the story around Ensight, but then, what is the, kind of where do we need to be going here? Should there be standards? Should there be certification? Because we're dealing with things around legal, cyber insurance, regulation.
Yep. Yeah. But and Andrew, we'll jump into all that. So let me start off with a quick story. I've been around Ensight for Stephen for over 20 years.
Yeah, easily.
So I met Mike Chapin and Josh Carroll, we were in a peer group together. And when I met them, I still, they're grown men with families. I call them kids because they were in their 20s when I met them. Like they were the youngest people in our group. And they had basically a professional services company. And when we came in the group and had already matured our managed, service model, they were like, wow, yeah, that's way better. And they got on a plane to Philadelphia and they came to Levittown, Pennsylvania to our office. And I spent a day basically going through the True Methods framework as we had it built. And I had a little atrium and we sat in there and they said, look, we're in, like we're burning the bridges. We're all in. And I watched them, take some lumps that first year, and some of the other peer members were hard on them and they were determined. And I watched them get to the other side. And I would say, 20 years later, for MSPs that aren't owned by PE, they're one of the largest, most successful, in North America. So just a really great story and two really great guys. And it was really a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, still is a pleasure. And Mike and I sit on a couple boards together.
I agree, Gary, in this public forum that my bosses are awesome and very good at business. Actually, it's fantastic. It's true. It's a great company to work for. We are not PE owned, and we're quite proud of that. So yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, and I'll end it there. We may or may not have gotten into a little trouble through the years.
There's no way, not those guys.
My
bosses are flawless and never have made mistakes.
I'm gonna leave that out. So let's talk about some of your experience kind of leading the CISO practice and how critical is like real world security experience? Like tell me kind of like those characteristics and then we'll contrast that to like VCIO.
Sure. So look, for all of my technical brethren out there on the call, I think we all know security is not your first job in IT, right? There is a foundation that needs to exist for you to be able to advise and to be able to discuss things with clients as situations come up. Like there's lots of different places where security has impacts in an organization, right? We're talking cloud or policy or on-prem or user behavior and training or cost benefit analysis or risk tolerance. And real world experience in events, in building a practice, in seeing many different situations allows you to advise in a very holistic manner, right? We have lots of, I'm sure we all know someone who's extremely versed in a single technology. I know an incredible Intune engineer, and I know an incredible Oracle engineer. And they're very good at those things. But we all know the bad guys only got to be right once, right? And the good guys got to be right every single time. So you can't, in security, take isolated incidents and isolated technologies and secure that and then be completely fine. It's going to be very, very challenging to say, cool, we secured your endpoints. All right, well, did you train your users? What about mobile? Have you done policies? So the experience in all of those things allows you to be a more holistic and more effective CISO because you're an advisory and consultant capacity. If you the more you know, the larger your breadth of experience, the more effective you're going to be because you've seen situations that are similar. And listen, I used to work for a gentleman who said, everything's already happened. And it's funny, data loss happens, attackers happen, computers get corrupted or ransomed. And although there's a bunch of new things happening, they kind of fall into the same categories. So being able to have seen them before and to be able to explain, I've been doing this for X period of years. We have other organizations with situations like this. It's very, very useful. It really raises your credibility.
But let me ask you this, because I went through this with VCIOs. I was like the first VCIO at my first MSP. And then it got to the point where we had to build and none of them had the same experience in business or in that job that I had. And so a lot of process had to be built in terms of how that ran so that we could get similar results from people with different types of knowledge and experience. How do you solve for that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. we call it standard work, but it's the same thing. It's a standardized process, right? There are a baseline of things that you can standardize around. And as we get more mature industries, and as AI gets more developed, and as the cloud gets more mature and solidified, we have a larger path of things that we can standardize. You can standardize things like looking at the Microsoft 365 secure score. You can standardize things like looking at an EDR and making sure things are doing well. You can build checklists, standard work around the baselines, the fundamentals, the maintenance stuff, right? The things that are going to show up on like an insurance form. Do you have these things? Are you implementing these training programs? Those things are relatively simple. And now simple and easy, not the same thing, but they're simple to do. And they're going to dovetail to a VCIO, right? VCIO is looking at things like backups and computer age and software patching and strategy, that kind of stuff. Those things are going to happen for all organizations. Everybody needs up-to-date computers, and everybody needs software that works and that kind of thing. Where it gets a little challenging is when you get into the unique situations, the middle of a breach, or nation-state attackers coming for your organization, or private equity boards that have very specific and strict requirements. We do a lot of mentoring and a lot of internship type activities with that, because you can't standardize everything. And I'm sure you know this as well, Gary. You want to standardize as much as you can. It's a reduction in cost, it's an improvement in quality, and an improvement in consistency. But there are always going to be some things that you need a senior for. And what we do, we call it Gemba, go to where the work is done. It's a Japanese term. And the point is you can learn from others. You can see where the mistakes may be happening. You can also learn how people do things. So, for example, when one of our clients has a challenging and unique situation, we bring one of our seniors in. The senior does the advising. They do the connection with the client. They make sure that they understand and the client can benefit from the years of experience. And that way the junior can learn. And that's how you get stronger people.
So you mentioned something there. You mentioned you more have to communicate with C-suite boards. Like, this is really common now. Like,
yeah.
Even though all this time we should have been dealing at the highest level is, VCIOs, but we don't always get there. But with VCISO, it's easier to get there because the people who, control the budgets and make strategic decisions are interested because they hold the risk for the security. Yeah. So, like, what knowledge gaps do you most see, like with technical professionals, when they have to make that leap from talking to people who speak their language to talking to the C-suite or to a board, and how do you help them bridge that?
That's the most common issue we see by a mile. And look, I came up in the engineering path, so for all my fellow engineers out there, stay strong. You'll get there. Everything's going to be okay. But the biggest challenge that you have from an engineering role, think about the difference between like a junior engineer and a senior engineer and an architect, right? I'm sure we all know someone who's very green in their role, but extraordinarily technically talented. They can solve your problems, and they're the ones that can make that firewall do magic, and they can set up entire Azure resources. The difference between, in my mind, the difference between a junior and a senior engineer is detail oriented, right? Everybody needs to understand that in the end, details really, really do matter, right? You have to make sure you do everything properly. And the difference between a senior engineer and an architect is the ability to communicate it. In the same way, in the security side, we have at our organization, and I'm sure others, lots of immense technical talent. I have a gentleman that works with me who can dig into Defender like no one else. I've got someone else who knows EDR like the back of their hand. They're phenomenal. And that's wonderful. But when you're talking to a C-suite, they speak risk. They speak cost-benefit analysis. They speak money. And they want to know trending. And the biggest challenge is to convert. You need to turn this attack surface reduction rule on in Intune to this reduces the risk to your organization by an appreciable amount, because there are industry standards and metrics to say this is a good process. Here's a third-party validation that says this is an excellent process. Honestly, like CIS, and I'm not trying to plug Phyllis here, but definitely trying to plug Phyllis here. There's something to be said for the industry including people that have nothing to sell you, deem this to be a lower risk, a wise financial move, and have an appropriate ROI for your peers. That level of communication is something that is our most frequently trained skill. Soft skills, when you're talking to executives, and everybody knows as you go up in management, you get less technical and more personnel based. In the same way with security, as you speak to higher in management, you must get less technical and more personnel based, right? So being able to speak risk, ROI, where the money's going, how it's going to help the future, market trends, and other peers in your sector is very important for getting that message across of security matters, even though it's not specifically production value. It's the reduction of the loss of production value. It's two sides of the same coin.
Yep. So you hit on a couple things there. To do that, you have to have some knowledge of their business, right? Because the impact of risk is different for every company. It's never the same. So I want to ask how you solve for the business knowledge part of it. I'm going to ask about certifications too, but first let's start on the business side of it. And then the second part to that would be, and it's always a balance they have to understand, because they're going to give up some productivity. They're going to give up maybe some things that from a doing business standpoint you wouldn't do, but you would from a security standpoint. So the business knowledge and how you explain that balance between governance and unfettered productivity.
I love that. Unfettered productivity is a great term, Gary. To answer your second part first.
Patent pending.
right. True methods, Kaseya, Gary Pika. So security and productivity are always at odds 100% of the time, right? Now, security and downtime may not be, but the more passwords, the more MFA, the more zero trust we put in, the more challenging it is to get basic things done. That is the nature of the beast, right? Now, for some organizations, they have a compliance or regulatory need where you can simply say, hey, you want your SOC 2 or you want your CMMC if you're going very aggressive. This is the rules. This is what NIST says. This is what AICPA says. We're done here. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. And they go, okay. From a non-regulated industry, and this goes back to your business knowledge, people have different risk tolerances, and you need to make sure that your risk profile, your client's risk profile aligns with their risk tolerance, right? A lot of what we do here requires the business knowledge because we need to educate our clients, and this is very challenger sale-y, so thank you for that. A lot of what our clients need to know is what risks they're actually accepting, and is it appropriate for the risk that their business wants. So I'll give you two really great examples. We have in our portfolio a ton of wineries and a ton of law firms. Okay, those are not the same risk profile. Now, they do share one, and they share the hardest risk, and it's reputational risk. Reputational risk is typically very difficult to find on a balance sheet, but executives understand that. Now, line staff may not, but having the business education to say, all right, winery, you're worried. We want to talk about what happens if your wine club gets posted on the dark web. That happens, right? The cost of switching wine clubs to a completely different winery and lose all that business is minimal for the end user, or the consumer of your wine can move to a different wine club, especially if that information that you weren't taking their personal data seriously is out on the dark web and it gets out on the public. And especially everybody, for your MSP, nobody's ever had a press story where the press said, well, this organization got hacked, but they didn't take any of the suggestions of their MSP.
And for really people who don't know the wine business, most of the wineries you're going to deal with, that's how they sell their wine. You don't
100% of the time.
You don't walk into Wine and Spirits and buy those brands. They're small batch brands, and their business is their list, right?
Gary, and correct me if I'm wrong. Can you hear me okay about that?
We can. Well, we can't anymore. We could. Give him a second. He'll come back.
Am I gone again?
You're back.
You're gone.
Okay. I was going to say often high net worth too, right, Gary? There a lot of
people who don't want their stuff on the web, like you're saying. It's very reputational.
Right. So that being said, the data of making wine, maybe not super valuable, right? What blends you have, I can see being proprietary data, but that gets posted on the dark web. It's not the same. Conversely, legal, if your client matter data gets posted on the dark web, that's business ending. There's just no option there. You have a duty to your clients so they can understand, I need to secure my data. They also understand, attorneys specifically understand reputation, right? They're big on that. We are the strongest divorce attorneys, or we're the best estate attorneys, or we're the best corporate law attorneys in the area, right? We have a lot of our attorneys are actually in Honolulu on Attorneys Row. It's actually a place in Honolulu, and there's a bunch of them there, right? So you could go to another organization if you found out that one of the organizations wasn't taking cybersecurity very seriously. This is where the business knowledge comes in quite a bit. Being able to speak to a managing partner or a winemaker or the owner of a vintner, something to that effect, allows you to say, we have others in your industry. This is what they're doing. We have a public framework like CIS. This is what they recommend. And neither of those entities are trying to sell you anything. They're just trying to keep everybody safe. It's a rising tide lifts all ships. Being able to tailor your security conversation, which again, a lot of executives see as only cost centers, being able to tailor that to say, these are the risks we're trying to avoid and the downtime we're trying to avoid is hugely important to be able to get a program actually implemented that means something. It's not just security for security's sake. And you can tailor it to a business like that.
Yeah, downtime and data. So I'm going to come back with some other ones, but I had just one more question.
Sure.
Formal credentials, do they impact how they're viewed by customers? Do you look at them when you're putting someone in that role, qualifications? So how do you look at any type of, credentials, security credentials?
Yeah. So yes, they matter. Now, again, speaking to my technical friends on the call, we all know having the piece of paper does not mean you can do the job. How many people know an MCSE from 2002 who's definitely still an MCSE, right? How many people know a CCNA or a CCNP that probably knows some iOS commands but has no idea how route and switch works, right? Those things exist 1000%. So please, everyone, don't take this as me saying the credentials are required so you know how to do the job, because I don't believe that to be true. I believe experience trumps absolutely all in efficacy. However, one of the reasons we're having this call entirely is to get some level of a baseline membership or proof or some level of certification credentialing that you have done the official work, that you have proven that you are willing to put the time and the personal development in, that you are willing to say, hey, I am really trying here. I have a third-party validation of my skills. I have passed an exam, and I at least have some level of officialness behind me. Third-party validation being extremely important. From a perspective of sales and from the perspective of communications to executives, remember that your clients they're bombarded by sales presentations. They're bombarded by other technical presentations. They're bombarded by security presentations all the time. And they have to separate the wheat from the chaff. When an executive has 30 seconds, 2 minutes to look at 14 different potential vendors, 14 different proposals, they're going to pick the ones that have officialness on them. They're going to pick the ones with certifications. It makes it easier for your sales team to sell your skills when you say, look, we hold these official certs and they're very important and they're industry recognized. That is crucial to getting in the door, to getting people's trust. I mean, everybody who's listened to the call, obviously we can't do a hand raise here, but how many times have you had to prove that you know what you're talking about? And people, when you're thinking, they should just trust you at face value because you're smart and you've done this a million times. This is how you do that. You say, I have put the time and energy in, right? I have gone through the certification process. A third party has said that I'm the one that knows what's going on. And you can trust what I'm saying here. And even more so, CEOs commonly are trying to meet a requirement imposed by someone else, whether it's DoD or CMMC, which is very similar, or audits, or internal stakeholders, or anything to that effect, right? They need to be able to go to their auditor or their client or their insurance company or say, hey, this person holds this credential, and that's how they pass this, and we can use them, and they can sign our paperwork. A CPA is very similar, right? A CPA is required to sign public financial statements, right? Does that make them a better accountant? Maybe, but probably not. Imagine, and Andrew's got this great point that he's texting us right now. Imagine seeing a lawyer or a doctor without a proper credentialing, right? I mean, they may be really, really good. It might be the best there ever was, but nobody wants to see Dr. Nick in a back room, and you don't know. You don't know if it's not a board-certified surgeon, right, or an attorney with current bar credentials. That matters to us too, and it should. But Gary, you're the big one that says, hey, listen, we have this problem in VCIO where everybody can kind of, I know computer stuff. Listen to me. But we're trying to avoid that insecurity because it matters.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, Phyllis, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So as we all know, cybersecurity is always evolving, and we're talking about training. And so how do you ensure that your VCISO stay up to date, and not just on threats, but you mentioned CMMC, just as importantly, if not more so, the regulatory frameworks, and new administration comes in, there's new executive orders that are always coming out, policy changes. So what is it that you do when you're training your VCISOs?
So I plugged Phyllis. I'll plug Andrew, who's above me on this one. We do this. We do continuing education. We participate in forums. We go to Right of Boom. We do continuing education, right? So again, like I said before, everybody's got to know an MCSE from 2002, right? Which is not super useful anymore. I prefer the certifications that have continuing education requirements. Now, don't get me wrong, they're a giant pain. Having to manage all the CLEs that you have to do is crazy, but doctors have to do it. Lawyers have to do it, right? Why shouldn't we? Especially if you want to show I'm up to date, I'm paying attention, I'm learning new things. Listen, for those of you that don't know, the ISACA Global Conference just ended late May. That's ISACA is one of the AICPA guys. They do a lot of the certifications for both IT and accounting. They had a 2-day conference. There's ISC Squared has one, and of course Right of Boom. They're all excellent ways to learn new emerging threats, new emerging techniques, new emerging technology. And if you don't keep yourself up to date, if you don't act like this is something that's going to evolve and change, you're going to be left behind. Now, we were Sophos's Partner of the Year in 23, and they estimated that in 2023, the ransomware industry was worth about $9.5 trillion. Now that's about the third largest GDP in the world. And the reason we know this, everybody, and this is a fun tidbit to take back to your teams, is the difference between 2005 when viruses were putting spirals on your computer and flipping your mouse buttons and being a pain, and now it's extortion and data theft and ransomware. The difference is Bitcoin. You can pay people now, which is how we know where all the money's going and how much money there is. Now listen, with that much money and that much market cap and valuation here, the pace of innovation in the threat actor industry, which is a weird statement, threat actor industry, but it absolutely is, and it absolutely does operate like that. The pace of innovation and change is amazing. It's beyond almost anything I think we've ever seen in history. And we can all see this, right? First, we weren't talking MFA, and now MFA is an absolute requirement. And then it was zero trust. And now we're seeing MFA token bypass attacks. And there's going to be something else. Something next. And I'm sure John Strand's going to come on here and tell us about all the crazy, horrible, or Bo, or you can tell us all the crazy, horrible things that are happening. And it's going to change every single year. And so that's why keeping up to date is so very, very important. Because if I go to one of my clients and say, you definitely need MFA and EDR, they're going to be like, thank you for 2015, right? You have to have relevant information. And again, regulatory insurance bodies, you have to keep up to date. And the way we do that is, like I said, training, conferences, continuing education, additional certifications as necessary. All the certs that I think are important have some level of continuing education, or they're a vendor certification for a technology we happen to support. But the big agnostic ones require continuing education, and it's important.
So speaking of continuous education, many MSPs, as well as other organizations, may undervalue that. And especially, during tight fiscal times like now, a lot of times travel and training, kind of get cut, right? And so, and organizations make it low priority. So how do you make the business case internally that this continuous education for VCISOs and other parts of the organization, it's not just a nice to have, but really is a core part of your risk mitigation strategy?
Yeah. Okay. Everybody who's on the call, do a thought experiment with me. You've onboarded new clients, I'm certain of it, right? Some of them are dramatically easier to sell security to. Why? And I think if you're not raising your hand in your own head or typing in chat right now, for us, it's because they've been hit before, right? Now that all the animals are out of the barn, you close the door. Fabulous. That's not a great security strategy, right? What I tell people is very, very simple. All organizations, every single one of them, are eventually going to have to talk to someone like me, right? Or everyone on the call that shares my role. Whether you talk to us before or after is your call, and one's cheaper. In that same vein, the bad guys don't stop because market conditions mean they cannot resource their hacking. That isn't a thing, right? And just in that same way, good guys also should not stop because there's not enough resources to train. Because now, when the economy is shaky or uncertain, and again, uncertainty and risk are really, really similar in an executive's eyes, this is the worst time to get breached, right here. When your sales are a little bit down and maybe you have a little bit of extra capacity in your team, but you don't really want to let anyone go yet, and you're not sure about international conditions and you're not sure about the capital markets, now's the time when it's really, really, really hard to sustain having to go through a breach or having to go through some level of claim with your insurance provider, right? This is the time when it's more challenging, which means this is the time you have to stay kept up. You can't under-resource security. Security is a price inelastic good, for those of you with economics in your background, meaning the cost of security and the importance of security will not change based on demand, right? You need to stay safe regardless of how much money you have. And the costs of not doing so are the VCIOs or the CIOs job, or CISOs job, to explain to the executive team. It is your job to explain to them, hey, even though we don't have a ton of resources right now, our risk profile has not changed. And getting breached right now is more damaging than breach when we're just flush and have tons of sales. So I tell everyone, you need that training budget, and that training budget should not be, as much as possible. Obviously, the real world exists and budgets exist, but as much as possible, that training budget should not be subject to how much money is coming in the door and the conditions of the economic marketplace. It's really, really hard to maybe we've under-resourced our team technically. We all understand technical debt. You got old computers and stuff out there, right? Security debt is really risky, right? I'll in complete transparency, everybody, we've got a portion of our clients that have no EDR. They're all on antivirus, and I am screaming from the highest mountain that this is not an approach that works nowadays, but they don't have the money. And I keep telling them, you'll
Isn't
have
it free?
it's pretty close.
If you have Kaseya 365, it's free.
It's true. But there's a reason for various things, right? That they don't want this. And I'm going, listen, you'll have the money if you get breached. But like I said, it's always cheaper to avoid a problem than to solve one every time. So Phyllis, that's what I mean. When the budgets go down, security doesn't, training doesn't, the need doesn't. It's important.
Right.
You know, Phil, it's almost related. Like you looked at it from the MSP investing in security and keeping up, but we also look at it now. At the last peer meeting, I get questions already, like just with the economic uncertainty, MSPs have customers coming to them and saying, "Hey, we're going to all of our vendors. We need to spend less."
Mhm.
And it's almost like, okay, do you need to do more with less? Yes. Okay, are you going to do that with better or worse technology, more secure or less secure, more productive or less productive? What would you like us to stop doing? Here's the things we cannot do anymore. We can stop aligning your technology to know what your risk is. Should we do that? Well, no. We can stop taking your calls. That's an easy one to do. We just won't support you. No. Should we not roll out all of our tools that we have? Well, no. Okay, should we not keep giving you advice that we have to give you on a regular basis? So what would you like us to stop doing?
Right. No, that's a
When
great
you
way to
need
have
us
that
most.
conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's true. It's like, people do go around asking. Yeah, I mean, even for us, on the paid side, they're asking for, oh, well, it's a tough time. Can we get a discount? So that's interesting. No, but that's a great way to respond, Gary. Gary always has all the good answers, you all.
He does. I wish I had Gary's soundbite skills.
So, when we talk about training, do you have kind of mandatory annual training you would require of VCISOs to keep abreast of, such as like cyber insurance, vendor risk, of course, breach notification laws, and all these regulatory requirements that may change?
Yeah. So in addition to the CPEs, so everybody, everyone that's got the VCISO title in our organization has CPE requirements. You have to have a couple of certs. Obviously, the CISSP is the big one, but there are others that are important. We really like having annual trainings for that. Now, there are a couple of other things that are important. For example, the part of the team that specializes in compliance, I need them to have compliance training. I want to make sure that whatever's changing. Now, listen, we all know the government doesn't change all that often. CMMC, of course, being a unique situation where it's been morphing heavily recently. But if the SOC 2 audit changes, now we're not auditors, but we need to understand how to get a client to where they need to be. We need to understand that. So I expect you to keep up to date on that, right? For PCI's changed a bunch every year for like 4 or 5 years now, and it's getting more and more intense. And for the record, everybody on the call, you probably have people taking credit cards, and there's literally no way around PCI anymore. They say if you take credit cards at all.
And I'm going to say 70% of the people that my MSPs I work with have audited are not PCI compliant.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. We expect people to stay up to date on that. So I think there are two paths that are important from a continuing education perspective. One, you got to keep your certifications up. Not only does it allow me to sell your services, but it allows us to effectively vet all of the applicants for the positions, and it allows executives and senior leadership to know that we have some level of officialness. And the second thing is you need to be able to keep up with all of the pieces that you're responsible for. So if you're responsible for, like, for example, business strategy discussion, I expect you to keep up to date with the business knowledge of your clients. I need you to know how their industry is working and what the changes are in there, and what potential technology may be coming up. Similar to a VCIO, obviously it's for security. If you're in legal, I need you to understand all the breach notification requirements that come with legality. If you do work with a lot of our insurance organizations, I need you to understand where our responsibility ends and where theirs begins. Now, typically with insurance, you get a breach coach, so they can tell you what the notification laws are for your specific industry. But the point is, you have to be able to do your job. And in security, due to the massive amount of change in the technology and security industries, being able to do your job means keeping up to date. Absolutely, end of story. Whether it's your certifications or the knowledge in the industry, you need to be able to do that.
Awesome. Thanks. I'm just going to answer a question in the chat. So we at CIS.
That's from Dan Eggleston.
Yes.
Yeah, I go back a ways. Hey, Dan, how are you doing? And tell Melissa I said hello.
Oh. So, yes. Excuse me. We at CIS are working with Cyber AccuView, which is a consortium of cyber insurers to come up with a standard questionnaire, actually like a standard list of questions at least, so that when insurers, cyber insurers, especially the smaller ones, ask questions of end organizations, they're going to be in the standardized format. And we've done a lot of the mapping to implementation group 1. Additionally, Google is a CSP that if you get a certain set of services from them, and part of it, and they're going to map to CIS controls as well as using CIS benchmarks, you automatically get insurance from a set of insurers that they're working with. So we have been working with external organizations to try to make getting cyber insurance easier, because we have heard from a lot of organizations, especially around the questionnaire, how difficult it is to answer it. Like the questions are different depending on the insurer, or they'll ask one more question and things like that. So we're trying to help with that standardization.
So if I may, Phyllis, we see the same thing in our industry. Everybody, for those that don't know, Google Travelers versus ICS, right? This was kind of the seminal case in insurance for MSPs. And effectively the deal was the MSP, no, sorry, not the MSP, the end user, the end client, was not truthful on their form, and they got breached actually twice. What happened is Travelers did not deny the claim. They did, but they also sued for rescission, meaning the policy was literally null and void from the beginning. All of your premiums are refunded retroactively. You never actually had insurance. Now, that of course means the client has to self-insure whatever breach is happening, which is terrible, but all other insurance companies know that's fraud. You're not getting insurance for a decade, right? Having some level of standardization is incredibly important. So Phyllis, I really applaud that. We spend a fairly inordinate amount of time not only answering insurance forms, but pulling out screenshots and pulling out logs to make sure what we said is provable, that it was true when we filled the form out. And having a standardized way to do that is
I was going
great.
to say, Stephen, some of that's not even security. Eric Tildes would say some
100%.
of it's business, just so that what you've done is defensible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, right? Whether it keeps you safer or not, if it's defensible so that you can get paid, so that you can get insurance.
That's really important, Gary. Almost everything we do in my organization from a security perspective is to say we did the right thing, we followed industry standards, we have the right certifications, we have the right people making the decisions. This is a very, very important point. Everybody gets breached eventually. Hopefully really, really rarely, and hopefully very minorly, and it's stopped quickly. But it always happens. I've got clients with my absolute best security technology out there, including Kelvin's CIPP, doing CSS protection. They get token theft. It happens. MFA token theft is a thing that we have limited protection against at the moment. And when they come to me and they say, how did this happen? I say, listen, this stuff does happen. We are doing all the right things. Right. We stopped it, we saw it, we detected it in the cloud, and we locked the account. We did the things. We minimize the damage, we move on with our lives. But being able to defend what you're doing and say, I have taken industry standard steps is hugely important. And certifications are part of that, because you're not going to be able to go to an investigator or a lawyer and say, well, this person really knows what they're doing. They've been doing this a while. You're going to be able to say, we followed the CIS implementation guide, and our team, the person managing the account holds these industry standard certifications. We know what we're doing. Bad things happen sometimes. It's really, really important.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more.
So you're saying you have an assume breach mentality.
Huh? I wasn't. Where did I hear that before? I can't remember. It feel like it's at the tip of my tongue.
So, Stephen, you guide other CISOs and advisors. How do you personally, keep yourself up to date on everything? And how do you maintain your leadership mindset and stay motivated, really, to do all of it?
Okay. In full transparency, everybody, if you work in security, you have some level of a hero complex. I have some level of a hero complex. I want to be the good guy. I want to save. I want to protect. So, and if you don't, if you want to fix and build, you're an engineer. That's fantastic. Do that thing. Good for you. And if you want to talk and advise, you're a VCIO. That's fantastic. But if you want to save and protect, security is your path. It is a continual challenge for me. And listen, not all of the team came up in the technical path, right? I have some teams that came up in the administrative VCIO path. They're way better at naturally wanting to speak risk to clients and wanting to speak the language of business and wanting to speak ROI. My constant struggle is not going technical, right? Now, again, as I become more of a managerial employee and less of a technical employee, I'm a little bit distracted and disjointed away from that, which is fine. It happens. But being able to continually have discussions like this, being able to sit in roundtables where people like Gary are talking about, hey, this is the language of business, reinforces that concept quite a bit. And for those of you that are taking the big security certifications, like, again, I mentioned the CISSP, there's others, there's the CISO, there's the CISM, there's all sorts of ones like that. And I know we're going to get to that in a minute. Those are mostly managerial certs, right? Now, if you're talking certified ethical hacker or security plus or something like that, they might be more technical. But the point is, when you're talking a VCISO, you're speaking the language of business and reinforcing that daily, understanding how KPIs work, understanding how targets work, understanding risk profiles, understanding the language of implement a program, not flip this switch in Azure, is a challenge for technical people. And the other side, understanding what happens under the hood, is a challenge for administrative people. We just need to understand those weaknesses. And I compensate for them as best I can. I'm never perfect at it. But sitting in calls like this and going to things where we're talking business, like when Sunil is out talking about the cyber defense matrix, and he's saying, hey, these are important concepts, but I'm not going to tell you, go into your Active Directory and make this specific group policy change. I'm going to tell you, achieve this goal. That's the biggest mindset switch that's needed to happen, and it needs to be continually reinforced.
Awesome. Thanks. Over to you, Gary.
So I had some more questions, but as I'm thinking, I'm going to kind of change my line of questioning a little bit. So I want to talk practically about the practice. So, there's math and science for how we build in VCIO. At least people that actually do VCIO, they should be knowing that, how many seats one VCIO can manage, which is how many customers. And so they're managing maybe 30 to 40 customers, right? When you get to VCISO, do you see this being built on top of what exists for VCIO? And what does that look like in terms of, do you look at the number of customers that can be managed? Like, how do you put that together?
So I think it's slightly different, but built on the same foundation. I think you're right, Gary. Obviously, the KPIs of how many clients you can take, how many endpoints and users you can take, they matter, but they're slightly different. When you're talking of VCISO, we try to stay away as much from the technical minutia. So adding 5 more seats is not the end of the world, right? Adding 20 more seats is not the end of the world. We do a lot of client measurements, right? There's only so many clients you can actually manage at once when you're doing proper policies, proper business discussions, proper risk tolerance. So for us, although KPIs are extremely important, we do have slightly different ones for our VCISOs instead of our VCIOs, because it's less about how many printers didn't work this quarter, and it's more about, are your proper policies and procedures in place? Do you have the proper technology?
I was thinking more in line with, if I'm like your VCISOs, do they engage with each of your customers, or just like maybe with some of the bigger ones and then work through the VCIOs for general other recommendations?
Depends on the plan, but to your general answer, yes, our larger customers have security specific agreements and they have specific VCISO time. For the smaller clients, it's usually an advisory capacity through the VCIO.
Yeah.
Depending. Now,
that's important, right? For people, like, I think this part of the conversation is super important. Like, how do you actually implement this? How do you cost it? And how do you do it cost effectively? And I've seen a lot what you have said, where you have a group of clients that basically cover the cost of that VCISO with engagements. And they spend the bulk of their time on internal security and then leveling up all the rest of the accounts through the VCIOs.
It's an advisory position.
Gary, can you guys hear me, or am I?
Yes,
we got you.
Good so far. I'll get it out real quick, hopefully. Gary, is there balance of compliance? Someone that's time they're going to need. Obviously, are they going to be audited? That's got to be in the equation, does it not?
Yeah, and it's hard because when you talk about compliance, as I've watched so many MSPs build their practices out, it's not like exactly like a cost per seat, because what it takes to do the compliance for someone with 60 users isn't that much different than 100 users. Like there's almost some floor at which you have to set on it. And so it takes, to me, I've watched people do it a bunch of times, cost it out, almost charge, ballpark things. And then once they understood that, Andrew, decide how they need to go to market with those services. Because Stephen, unlike other things, it's not really exactly like a per seat basis like other things.
Yeah, and interestingly, what Brian Blakely put in, Gary, if you could read that, because Brian had a VCISO practice. He very successful one and sold it. So interesting math of how he looks at it.
35 to 60K in VCISO revenue per month. Yeah.
So
yeah, that not too dissimilar to VCIO. VCIO is actually higher than that. Like you're going to manage way more customers, but it's not direct revenue. He's talking about direct revenue per month.
Correct. He's talking
which you would almost compare it to like professional services. And so
correct.
I would agree with it.
Correct. And that's nice. That's a nice scale there, Gary. If you're doing 60K a month, let's just say times 12, that's not a bad return.
Yeah. And then also you think and once it's built out, even if it's 35K, but once it's built out, your relationship with those clients, the other services you have with those clients, the kind of work that comes off for those clients based on that relationship, it is a winner. It's a winner. And the fact that your security posture for those clients is way higher and they're way safer and see way more value in everything that you do.
Your cost per seat is going to be incrementally higher, isn't it, Gary, too? Cost per seat.
Yeah, your average price per seat. On that value overall, is going to be much higher. And, and more what I tell people is if I had to pick one number that's more important than your average seat price, it's your average MRR, what your average deal size is. Increasingly, Andrew, that impacts so many things in MSP's business. And this is the kind of stuff that raises that profitably.
100%. I know you and Phyllis have a hard stop at the top of the hour. Should we kind of put a bow on it here?
Yeah, why don't we wrap it up?
Yeah, Stephen, that was phenomenal. Again, man, just really, really awesome insight. Not to be confused with insight.
Insight.
Yeah.
Aha,
like that. Phyllis.
I think he said you did great, Phyllis. I'm going to go ahead and speak for Andrew. Excellent.
I think he's saying, I'm great. You're great. Gary's
Everybody's great.
We're going to see
more like this
next week, maybe. Although next week is the PAX 8 thing, so I don't know if we're gonna. Are we gonna have this next week?
Let's try, Phyllis. Let's me and you do it on the road.
Road show.
Yeah, we'll be in Denver. So all right.
All right.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Stephen, great job, man.
Yeah,
great topic. And Andrew, something we should dig into more. I have some ideas and some other side.
I love the voice of the MSP stuff. It's really nice to hear from the ground. It's really cool.
Great.
All right, everybody. Have a good day.
Everybody, take care.